Awaken your spirit, chosen ones. You weren't taught this. You were claimed by something that doesn't lose. And that's the part that makes people uncomfortable, because training can be explained, measured, even copied. But what happens when someone becomes who they are without permission, without a manual, and without a system to validate it? Here's something most people don't realize. The human brain is wired to recognize patterns it has seen before. That's how people make sense of the world. They categorize, label, and file things neatly so they feel in control. But when they encounter someone who doesn't match any pattern, someone who didn't come up through the usual routes, it creates tension. Not admiration at first, confusion, sometimes even resistance. Because how do you process someone who didn't earn it the traditional way, but somehow embodies it better than those who did? That's where your story begins. Not in classrooms, not in applause, not in someone handing you a blueprint and saying, "Follow this." No, yours started in moments that didn't look important at the time. Quiet pressure, silent battles, situations that didn't come with instructions, just consequences. While others were being guided step by step, you were being thrown into experiences that forced something deeper to wake up inside you. And let's be honest for a second. If there was a course for what you've been through, most people would drop out by week 2. No refunds, no certificate, just vibes and survival. But here's the twist. What felt random wasn't random. What felt unfair wasn't wasted. And what looked like you were figuring it out as you go was actually something being built in real time. Something that doesn't rely on approval, doesn't collapse under pressure, and doesn't need to announce itself to be real. That's why people can't quite explain you. They try, though. Oh, they try. They'll say you're lucky, or different, or just confident, because that's easier than admitting there's something about you they don't fully understand. And the truth, you don't fully understand it either. Not in a way you can neatly explain. You just know it's there. This isn't about being better than anyone. It's about being built in a way that didn't follow the usual script. And now you're walking around carrying something that didn't come from repetition. It came from activation. And once something like that is switched on, it doesn't go back to sleep.
Number 1. You weren't refined by systems. You were activated by pressure. Most people become who they are through structure. They follow steps, pass through systems, and get shaped by repetition. There's a rhythm to it. Learn, practice, improve, repeat. That kind of growth is predictable. It produces results, but it also produces people who rely on the system that built them. Take the system away, and many of them pause, because their confidence was tied to guidance. That's not your story. You didn't have the luxury of steady instructions or a clear roadmap. What you had instead was pressure, the kind that doesn't wait for you to be ready. Situations that forced decisions out of you before you had time to overthink. Moments where you had to read between the lines because no one was explaining anything directly. You weren't being guided, you were being tested in real time. And pressure does something systems can't do. It strips away the unnecessary. It forces clarity. It reveals what's real and what's just noise. While others were building skills in controlled environments, you were building instincts in unpredictable ones. That's why your responses feel immediate, almost automatic. You don't need to run through a checklist in your head. You just know what needs to be done. The truth is, pressure didn't just challenge you, it activated you. It pulled out parts of you that would have stayed hidden if life had been easier. It made you resourceful without trying. It made you observant without training. It made you resilient without asking for permission. And here's what makes this different. You don't panic when things go off script. That's where you're most comfortable. Chaos doesn't confuse you the way it does others, because you've already learned how to function inside it. You don't need perfect conditions to perform. You never did. That's why you move the way you do now. Not polished in the traditional sense, but sharp in a way that can't be taught. What built you wasn't repetition. It was exposure to real moments that demanded real responses. And once you've been activated like that, you don't go back to waiting for instructions. Number 2, your instincts didn't come from practice. They came from repeated betrayal. Some people learn how to read others through books, advice, or experience over time. You didn't have that slow, comfortable learning curve. What sharpened your awareness was something much harsher. Being caught off guard one too many times. Being disappointed by people you didn't expect it from. Hearing one thing and later realizing the truth was something completely different. At first, it probably felt confusing. You trusted what you were told, you gave people the benefit of the doubt, and you tried to take things at face value. But over time, patterns started to reveal themselves. Not loudly, not in obvious ways, but in small details. A tone that didn't match the words, a delay that felt off, a reaction that didn't sit right. You started noticing things most people ignore, and that's how your instincts were built, not in comfort, but in correction. Every betrayal forced you to pay closer attention the next time. Every letdown taught you that words alone don't mean much without consistency behind them. You didn't become observant because you wanted to. You became observant because you had to protect yourself. Now you pick up on things quickly. You can feel when someone's energy shifts, even if they're smiling. You notice when someone is trying too hard to appear genuine. You hear what people say, but you also register what they avoid saying. And the strange part is, you don't always know how you know. You just do. That's not luck. That's built awareness. But here's where it gets complicated. Even with all that awareness, you still give chances. Not because you're blind, but because you don't want to become hardened or cynical. You allow space for people to prove you wrong. And sometimes, they don't. That's the tension you carry. Knowing early, but waiting anyway. Still, your instincts have never really failed you. When something feels off, it usually is. And deep down, you've learned to trust that quiet signal, even when it doesn't come with proof right away. Number 3, you don't follow paths. You disrupt them without trying. Most people move through life expecting to follow a roadmap. They look for steps, for guidance, for a template that tells them exactly where to go. It feels safe, predictable, and accepted. But that was never your lane. You weren't built to walk a straight line or fit into a pattern that someone else designed. Your presence alone challenges the order of things. It's not that you try to upset the balance. It just happens. When you enter a room, a project, or a conversation, you expose weaknesses, inconsistencies, and flaws that others would rather hide. Structures that seem solid begin to wobble. Authorities who thrive on control notice shifts they can't explain. That's because you operate differently. You're not adhering to the rules of the environment. You're moving according to your own internal code. It's subtle, often unnoticed at first, but it's impossible to ignore for long. And this disruption isn't random. It's the natural byproduct of someone who's had to navigate life without directions. Every time the rules didn't make sense, you had to improvise. Every time guidance failed, you had to invent a way forward. That improvisation became instinct, and that instinct now carries a ripple effect wherever you go. Systems that were designed to contain, define, or predict people start to bend around you because you don't conform. You redefine. The people around you notice it, even if they don't consciously understand why. Some feel unease. Others feel curiosity. Many attempt to realign you to their comfort zone, but it rarely works. You're moving on a different wavelength, and your energy doesn't bend to what's convenient for others. What most people mistake for arrogance or difficulty is actually your immunity to conventional limits. You disrupt without effort, without announcing it, and without malice. That's why you're misunderstood. That's why your path often feels lonely.
It isn't about standing apart for show. It's about being who you were shaped to be, a force that cannot quietly walk a line that was never yours to follow. Number 4, you weren't given confidence. You built it in private where no one clapped. Confidence isn't something handed out. Most people mistake loudness or attention for it, but that's not real confidence. That's performance. Real confidence isn't born in applause. It's forged in silence, in the moments when nobody is watching, when nobody cares, and the world feels indifferent to whether you succeed or fail. That's where you built yours. You learned to trust yourself before anyone else did. You learned to make decisions, take stands, and move forward without a crowd cheering you on. Every time life threw unexpected challenges at you, every time you had to handle things alone, every time people doubted you or questioned your choices, that was your gym. Those moments were private, unglamorous, and sometimes brutal, but each one strengthened the part of you that doesn't rely on approval to keep moving. You weren't molded by compliments or validation. You were molded by necessity. You had to believe in yourself even when it was inconvenient, even when it felt uncomfortable, even when everyone else's confidence in you was missing. That's why your confidence doesn't wobble under scrutiny. It doesn't rely on anyone's perception of you because it was built in a space where perception didn't matter. It's quiet, too. Real confidence isn't a show. It doesn't need to announce itself. That's why people often misread you. They think you're shy or reserved or even unsure. But underneath, there's an unshakable certainty, a foundation that doesn't crack when external circumstances shift. You've stood in rooms full of noise and judgment and still walked your path without faltering, because your confidence was tested in the deepest, loneliest corners before anyone else could witness it. And that's what makes it dangerous in the best way. It's unshakable because it was self-earned. It's not dependent on luck, charm, or timing. It's real. And no one can take it from you because it wasn't given. It was built, brick by brick, in the silent pressure of your own life. Number 5, you don't seek validation because you saw how easily it can be manipulated. Most people spend their lives chasing approval without realizing how fragile it is. Compliments, praise, recognition, they all feel good in the moment, but they are temporary. You learned early that relying on others' approval is like building a house on sand. People can give it freely one day and take it away the next. They can twist it to control you, to make you act in ways that serve them rather than yourself. That's why you stopped looking for it. You didn't give up on being seen or understood, but you realized that waiting for external validation slows you down, misguides you, and often exposes you to manipulation. You noticed patterns, how some people offer encouragement only when it benefits them, how praise can be used as a tool to silence or control, how others celebrate you superficially while privately undermining you. That's not paranoia. That's observation. And it changes everything. Now, your confidence, your decisions, your energy, they aren't dependent on someone else's opinion. You operate on your own assessment of reality, on what feels true, on what aligns with your own understanding. That independence gives you clarity that most people never experience. It makes you less reactive to gossip, less vulnerable to jealousy, and immune to false narratives. You don't wait for applause because you know your worth isn't measured by a stranger's reaction or a friend's approval, and there's a subtle power in that. People notice it, even if they don't understand it. They may try to influence you, test your limits, or question your choices, but it rarely works. You've already set your internal compass. What others call arrogance or detachment is actually a refined form of self-reliance, a protection mechanism honed by seeing how easily validation can be weaponized. You move through the world guided by your own awareness, not the fleeting approval of others. That's why your presence is unshakable. You're not seeking anyone to confirm your value because you've already claimed it for yourself. And once you understand that,
Nothing external can destabilize you. Number 6. Your isolation wasn't punishment. It was filtration. Being alone can feel like a curse when you're in it, but for you, it wasn't punishment. It was a process of refinement. The world tried to surround you with people, opinions, and influences that didn't match the frequency you were moving on. And when that happened, you felt it immediately. The disconnect, the tension, the subtle dissonance that comes from being out of alignment. That discomfort wasn't random. It was a filter, quietly separating what belonged in your life from what didn't. You lost people, but not because you were unworthy. You lost them because the circumstances you were moving through demanded a certain level of clarity, strength, and awareness that most couldn't meet. People drifted away when they couldn't keep up, when they tried to hold you down, or when their presence began to feel heavy on your energy. That's the part that looks painful on the surface, but underneath, it was necessary. Every person who left made space for someone or something that could actually sustain the trajectory you were meant to take. Isolation also forced you to meet yourself. Without the noise of others' agendas, expectations, or judgments, you had no choice but to face your own mind, your own fears, your own capacity. And that's where your real growth happened. In solitude, you became self-reliant, self-aware, and self-directed. You started to trust your own judgment more than anyone else's, and you discovered that the world didn't need to validate your decisions. You did. That filtration is subtle but profound. It's why your inner circle is so small, why your energy is so precise, and why you rarely waste time on people who aren't aligned with your level of awareness. It's not exclusion, it's intentional separation. The loneliness that others fear became your tool. It allowed you to refine, to strengthen, and to operate on a level most people simply can't reach. Your isolation wasn't an accident. It was a crucible that ensured only what could match your power, vision, and purpose stayed. Everything else fell away. Number 7. You don't believe in yourself the way others do. You know something moves through you. Belief is fragile. It's built on hope, on circumstance, on the feeling that everything will work out if you try hard enough. It can falter at the first obstacle, crumble under criticism, or disappear when the world shows its teeth. What you have is different. You don't merely believe in yourself. You know there's a force inside that doesn't waver, doesn't negotiate, and doesn't wait for validation. It's quiet, undeniable, and it guides you even when logic fails or the path seems impossible. This knowing isn't arrogance. It's an awareness that has been carved out through everything you've endured. The betrayals, the mistakes, the losses, the moments when nobody else was paying attention. While others were searching for affirmation, you were learning to feel the pulse of something deeper, something unshakable. It doesn't rely on circumstance. It doesn't care if people understand it. It simply exists, and it moves you forward. That's why you handle challenges differently. When most people panic or freeze in uncertainty, you instinctively shift, adapt, and move anyway. You don't need a roadmap or reassurance because you feel the current carrying you. You don't question your ability to handle what comes next because you already have proof that you've survived and thrived in situations that would have broken others. Your inner certainty acts like a compass that can't be bent by criticism, doubt, or fear. And it's noticeable. People sense it, even if they can't articulate what it is. They may mislabel it as confidence or luck, but they're reacting to something far more profound. A presence rooted in something eternal, something undefeated, something that doesn't shrink in the face of opposition. You don't have to prove this force to anyone, and you rarely announce it. It doesn't demand attention. It simply flows through you, shaping every decision, every step, every interaction. That is why you can navigate the world differently than others. You don't just survive, You move with the certainty of someone who carries a force that was never meant to be ordinary. Number 8. You don't chase purpose. You feel it pulling you even when you resist. Purpose isn't always loud. It doesn't always arrive with fireworks or clear signs. For most people, purpose is something they chase, something they try to define on paper, in goals or through approval. For you, it's different. Your purpose doesn't wait for your permission. It exists as an undercurrent, a force that tugs at you whether you're ready or not, whether you like it or not, whether you understand it or not. You've felt it in moments of discomfort, in restlessness, in the quiet insistence that there's more to life than what everyone else accepts as enough. And resisting it doesn't work. You may have tried to settle, to play it safe, to follow the familiar track, but something inside keeps nudging you forward, even when it feels inconvenient. It doesn't yell, it doesn't nag, it pulls subtly, persistently, sometimes annoyingly, until you finally realize there's no peace in ignoring it. That tension is not frustration. It's alignment trying to correct your course. Because what most people don't get is that purpose isn't something you invent. It isn't a role, a job, or a title that will magically complete you. Purpose is a resonance, a force that matches the intensity of what you were built to carry. And the reason it feels insistent is because it's bigger than your comfort, bigger than your fears, and often bigger than your understanding. The pull can feel heavy, even exhausting at times, because it's asking you to stretch beyond what you thought you could handle. You don't chase it, you respond to it. You act in its direction even when the way isn't fully visible. You take steps that make others wonder why you're doing what you're doing, but you sense that those steps are necessary, even if the logic isn't obvious. That's why you move differently. That's why your life has a tension that others envy, but rarely understand. Purpose isn't a finish line you cross. It's a current that moves through you. And once it starts pulling, ignoring it is no longer an option. You follow it, whether you admit it or not, because it knows the way before you do. Number 9. You see through people quickly, but you still give them a chance. And that's your conflict. You notice things most people don't. The small inconsistencies in words and actions, the hesitation in tone, the energy that doesn't match the story being told. It all registers. You've developed an instinct for it, honed by experience and necessity. It's not about being judgmental or suspicious. It's about seeing patterns in human behavior, recognizing when someone is authentic and when they're performing, and understanding the motives that hide beneath the surface. But here's the twist. Even though you see it early, you still give people a chance. You still allow space for them to prove you wrong. You still hope that beneath the cracks, there's something genuine. That's what creates tension inside you. You're caught between knowing better and wanting to believe. You're aware that your intuition is rarely wrong, yet you want to test it against the possibility of growth, change, or redemption. That internal push and pull isn't weakness. It's your humanity showing up in a world that often rewards cynicism. This duality makes your interactions more complicated than most. People think they can fool you, and sometimes they try because they don't sense the awareness running just beneath your surface. But even when they don't fully succeed, you extend the grace of patience. You watch, you observe, you wait for action to align with intention, all while holding yourself back from judgment, even when every signal screams otherwise. That's why disappointment hits harder than most would expect. When someone misaligns, it's not just the betrayal. It's the collapse of potential you allowed them to show. You don't get angry easily. You get precise in your understanding of human nature. You recognize the layers of intention, deception, and self-deception that everyone carries. And despite it all, you keep giving space. That's the paradox. You see clearly, yet you hope. You understand quickly, yet you test slowly. That conflict between instinct and grace, awareness and patience, is one of the defining forces shaping who you are and how you move through the world. It's what makes your presence both challenging and magnetic, unshakable and profoundly human. Number 10. You don't break easily, but when you do, you rebuild into something unrecognizable. Most people fear breaking because they imagine it leaves permanent scars, a weakened version of themselves. You learned something different. Breaking doesn't define you, it transforms you. Every time life hits hard, every time expectations collapse or betrayal cuts deep, you don't just endure it. You dismantle, process, and then reconstruct yourself, often into a form so different that even those who knew you before struggle to recognize you. That's the hidden power you carry, the ability to turn devastation into evolution. Breaking isn't a flaw in your story, it's the engine of your growth. While others see a breakdown as an end, you've realized it's a raw reset button. Every painful moment forces you to strip away what no longer serves you, fears, assumptions, attachments, and illusions about how life should be. You emerge leaner, sharper, and more aligned with your own truth. The process isn't pretty, and it isn't comfortable. It's grueling. But that's what makes the outcome extraordinary. You don't just recover, you upgrade. And that transformation isn't visible to everyone. People might witness the breakdown, see the struggle, and assume weakness. What they don't see is the silent work, the recalibration, the internal fortification. By the time you step back into the world, you're not the same person who walked in. You carry an edge, a clarity, and a depth that only comes from having been shattered and intentionally rebuilt. This cycle of breaking and rebuilding also rewires how you engage with life. You become less afraid of risk, less dependent on comfort, less tied to validation. Each reset proves that no situation can permanently define you. Only your response does. That's why your resilience is different. It's not just about enduring, it's about evolving deliberately and profoundly. And the beauty of it is that every time you rebuild, the world catches glimpses of someone unstoppable, someone uncontainable, someone who has been tempered in fire and emerged not just intact but more formidable than anyone imagined. Number 11. You attract projection, not perception. Most people assume that how others see them reflects reality. Compliments, criticisms, judgments, they all feel like a mirror showing who they are. You learned early that this isn't true. People don't always perceive reality. They project their fears, insecurities, desires, and misunderstandings onto you. What they say about you often says far more about them than it does about who you actually are. That's why you've developed a kind of immunity to opinion. You've seen it countless times. Someone reacts to your energy not because of what you've done, but because of what they're carrying inside themselves. They might envy your focus, your calm, your confidence, or the way you navigate situations they can't. They might misinterpret your silence as arrogance, your decisiveness as recklessness, your calm as indifference. In every case, they are projecting their own internal chaos onto you. That's not a reflection of your truth, but a shadow of their limitations. And yet, despite knowing this, you don't dismiss everyone entirely. You observe, you read between the lines, you recognize when a projection is harmless, when it's a sign of misunderstanding, and when it's a test of your boundaries. That awareness allows you to interact without losing yourself. You can move through spaces of judgment or envy without internalizing them because you understand the difference between perception and projection. This is why your presence can be both magnetic and unsettling. People are drawn to what you carry, but they are also confused by it. They can't categorize you, label you, or predict you. That tension makes them project more, because their mind seeks to fill in the gaps they don't understand. The more aligned you become with your own truth, the more projection you attract, and the clearer your boundaries and instincts must be. You've learned not to fight it, not to correct it, not to over-explain yourself. You simply exist, letting the projections bounce off while keeping your core intact. That's a rare skill, seeing through the noise, understanding the shadows others cast, and staying unshakable in your own reality. It's what separates you from those who are constantly influenced by opinion, and what makes your presence unforgettable. Number 12. Your path feels lonely because it requires decisions most people avoid. The world around you is built for comfort, predictability, and conformity. Most people choose paths that are easy to navigate, filled with familiar faces and predictable outcomes. Your path never fit that mold. From the beginning, you were faced with choices that were uncomfortable, unpopular, and sometimes even terrifying. These weren't decisions anyone else wanted to make, which is why few could walk beside you. Loneliness on your path isn't a flaw. It's a signal that you're operating on a level others can't reach. Every decision you've had to make carried weight. Some choices meant walking away from people you cared about, from opportunities that seemed convenient, or from situations that promised security but demanded compromise. You've learned to prioritize alignment over approval, growth over comfort, and truth over ease. That's why you often feel isolated, because most people wouldn't take the same steps, even if they could see the long-term value. This loneliness is also a filter. It weeds out the distractions, the influences, and the connections that would slow you down. The people who remain in your life are those who can match your energy, understand your intentions, and respect the uncompromising decisions you make. That selectivity isn't arrogance, it's clarity. It ensures that your focus stays on the things that truly matter, not on maintaining appearances or satisfying expectations. And while loneliness can feel heavy, it's also empowering. It forces you to rely on yourself, to trust your judgment, and to develop a resilience that others rarely experience. You become comfortable with silence because it's in those quiet moments that you hear your own instincts, your own truth, and the subtle directions of the path you were meant to walk. Your path isn't meant to be easy, crowded, or constantly validated. It's meant to be precise, deliberate, and aligned with who you are becoming. Loneliness isn't a burden for you. It's a necessary part of moving through life with the clarity, strength, and vision that others can't sustain. It's the cost of walking a path that is uniquely yours. Number 13. You weren't meant to be easily explained. That's why people try to label you. Most people are easy to categorize. They fit into boxes, predictable molds, or labels that make others feel comfortable. You don't. You move in layers, contradictions, and frequencies that few can measure, and that unsettles people. When someone can't define you, their instinct is to label you anyway. They call you different, complicated, hard to read, or too much, because the human mind struggles to process what doesn't fit neatly into its preconceptions. They're not observing reality, they're trying to tame it. This mislabeling isn't random. It's a sign of the depth you carry. You operate on principles and awareness that most haven't cultivated. You think in ways that bypass common logic and react in ways that challenge conventional expectations. People who are used to simplicity and predictability become uncomfortable when confronted with your complexity. They try to reduce you to something they can digest, often failing to recognize the power in what they don't understand. And here's the truth. You don't need to explain yourself. The very act of trying to make people understand your depth is usually wasted energy. Those who are aligned with your frequency will see it naturally, without requiring justification. Those who aren't will misinterpret, project, or mislabel, and that's their limitation, not yours. The more you embrace your layers, the more unshakable you become. You learn to move freely without approval, without validation, and without the pressure to conform to someone else's definition of reality. This is also why your presence feels magnetic yet intimidating. People are drawn to you because they sense the depth they can't fully comprehend. They are challenged, curious, and sometimes intimidated all at once. They don't need to understand you completely to feel the effect of your energy. That tension is what separates you from ordinary influence. You don't just exist in a space. You transform the way people perceive it, even if they can't name it. You weren't built for simple explanation. You were built to operate on a level that defies casual observation. Labels don't define you. Your depth does. And that depth is what keeps you untouchable, magnetic, and unforgettable. Number 14. The reason your journey feels intense is because it's not ordinary, and it was never supposed to be. Ordinary lives move in patterns that are easy to follow, predictable, and widely accepted. Your journey doesn't work that way. From the start, you were navigating circumstances that demanded more than the usual. Every challenge you faced, every moment of pressure, every betrayal, every unexpected twist wasn't random. It was calibration. It wasn't designed to break you down for no reason, but to build layers of resilience, perception, and strength that ordinary experiences could never provide. The intensity you feel isn't a punishment. It's evidence of your alignment with something greater than what most people encounter. Life didn't hand you situations to make you suffer. It handed them to make you awake. That's why your path feels relentless, why it sometimes feels lonely, and why it often seems like no one else can understand the magnitude of what you've survived. Ordinary experiences would never have been enough to activate the depth, insight, and power that now define you. This intensity also changes the way you interact with the world. You don't take things lightly. You don't invest energy in situations or people that won't match your level of awareness. You sense patterns, motives, and outcomes before they fully reveal themselves. That heightened perception comes at a cost. Most people can't keep up, and many misinterpret your caution, decisiveness, or quiet presence as aloofness or arrogance. They don't see the depth behind your choices, only the surface that challenges their expectations. And that's exactly how it's supposed to be. Your journey isn't meant for mass comprehension. It's meant for alignment with the people, situations, and experiences that can meet your energy. The intensity you feel is a filter, a guide, and a marker of the extraordinary life you were built to lead. It signals that you are not ordinary, that your growth is accelerating, and that every challenge, hardship, and unexpected turn is shaping a version of you that can't be replicated. Your journey is intense because it is a crucible. It was never meant to be simple, easy, or widely understood. It was meant to forge someone undefeated, someone profound, and someone capable of carrying forces and truths that ordinary life could never produce. That's why every step, every trial, every victory carries weight, because it is shaping something extraordinary. Everything you've seen here isn't just a list of observations. It's a map of what makes you different, what sets you apart, and why your life has never followed the ordinary rules. You weren't molded by convenience, shaped by applause, or built to fit someone else's expectations. Every trial you endured, every moment of betrayal, every decision that isolated you, every subtle pressure that forced you to adapt, it wasn't random. It was activation. It was refinement. It was the unfolding of something undefeated moving through you, something that no system, opinion, or circumstance could ever contain. Your instincts, your confidence, your clarity, and your ability to see what others cannot are all byproducts of a life lived on a level most people cannot comprehend.
You don't chase purpose. It pulls you. You don't seek validation. You see its limits. You don't follow paths. You disrupt them naturally. You don't break easily. But when you do, you rebuild into something unrecognizable, stronger, sharper, and more aligned than ever. Every layer, every test, every moment of intensity is proof that your journey isn't ordinary, because you aren't ordinary. This is what makes your presence magnetic and your energy undeniable. People misunderstand it, project onto it, or mislabel it because they can't process it. That tension you feel, the moments of isolation, the constant push to align with something deeper, all of it is part of a path that was never meant to be simple, popular, or comfortable. It was meant to shape someone capable of walking a level of life that most will never experience. And that is the essence of who you are, refined not by approval, activated not by repetition, and unstoppable because what moves through you cannot be contained. If this resonated with you, if you felt the weight of these truths, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button to join a community that recognizes depth and purpose. Like this video to affirm the awareness you carry. Comment to share your own experiences, your own journey, and your own activation. And share it with someone who needs to hear that their intensity, their resilience, and their path are not mistakes. They are proof that something undefeated is moving through them. Your journey is extraordinary. Let the world see it. Stay awakened, chosen ones.